I decided for this review to try to avoid as much spoilers as possible for a story-driven game like this, so I'm going to be a bit vague when explaining the story details and have most of the footage missing subtitles. Please enjoy this review. What originally started off as an early PS4 tech demo known as Kara is now a fully fledged narrative-driven game by Quantic Dream. Carrying on the genre that they're so well known for, Quantic Dream brings us Detroit Become Human, a continuation of the steady progress the studio has done to create a near cinematic storytelling experience in a video game. This new ambitious title tries to up the ante of Quantic Dream's previous work, tackling heavier and darker subjects sometimes marvelously, and other times stiff and lacking. Detroit Become Human takes place in the year 2038. In this near future narrative, society has begun adopting androids in everyday life. They're helping take care of our children, clean up around the house, and well, pretty much everything a human does. Much like how real-life robots are replacing some human jobs, androids in this future have begun replacing human workers too, and there's a large backlash because of it. So while there's a growing tension between androids and humans that refuse to adopt them into society, a bug of some sort has been growing within some of the androids called deviants. This bug comes from the immense pressure of being presented irrational commands causing the android to refute orders. The story is presented in bite-sized narratives split between 3 characters. The game follows a timeline that switches between the different points of views of the 3 main characters, occasionally having the metaphoric vines of the story entwine. These different perspectives at times can tackle some pretty heavy subjects that are no stranger to Quantic Dream. Quantic Dream is known for being a developer that's dived into more adult, controversial, and sexual topics in their games, and the studio continues that trend with Detroit. At times they nail the subject matter and really show why Detroit is my favorite Quantic Dream game so far, but then they'll also stumble a few times and have a very awkward execution of a very serious subject matter. The 10 to 12 hour story is certainly Quantic Dream's best work so far, but much like the games before it, there's some room for improvement. Immediately starting Detroit, you're presented to a futuristic hostess that leads you into the adventure of Detroit. Admittedly, it's a little bit cringy at first, like the introduction to Catherine crossed with the movie I, Robot. This little bizarre intro aside, we quickly jump into what gameplay for Detroit is like. If you're unfamiliar with Quantic Dream's games before, this means you'll make a lot of decisions and performing simple actions that completely alter the events of the game's narrative. Playing as 3 androids, you'll use certain abilities that only androids can perform, and even further unique abilities that only certain androids can perform. The cast consists of Connor, a prototype android detective hunting down the cause of the deviants, Kara, a domestic android put in charge of watching over a single father and her daughter, and lastly Marcus, another caretaker android for an aging artist in a wheelchair. Although each of the characters are androids, they each provide unique perspectives to the larger issues in the futuristic society, along with their own sets of abilities. Playing as Connor, you'll be analyzing a lot of crime scenes and evaluating different executions of plans. With the press of the R2 button, you can jump into a scan mode and quickly look for pinpoints or clues that you can scan and analyze. Oftentimes as a detective, you'll have to gather clues to lower the tension of the situation, or have better answer options to conversations and decisions you'll have to make later on. The scanner can also be used to create a timeline of events that shows what most likely happened during the crime, using evidence you found around the crime scene. Oftentimes you'll be presented with situations where you have to lower the risk or raise the probability of something happening based on how you answer certain questions or lead conversations. Likewise, your answers can affect the opinions of other characters on you and thus how the story will play out. That's Connor's perspective at least. You still have the basic scanning abilities with the other 2 androids, but different tones and experiences. Kara, for example, offers a much more linear story or point of view, but she also has some of the darkest moments of the story. Her perspective offers both the most intimate interactions between characters, but is also the one with the least amount of freedom to alter the story. Her story feels like a funnel where you're presented with a bunch of choices but ultimately lead to the same result. Ironically with Kara, with her story being some of the darkest material in the game, having to constantly take care of a little girl named Alice, it's weird to have one of the least charming little girls in a video game. You're supposed to feel so sorry for her, and though I did a few times, her quiet and timid personality and actions didn't really leave me much to care for. Where I think the game developers were aiming to have you want to protect this little girl because she's an adorable little girl, is more or less you have to protect her because she's just a little girl, not so much because you care about her. With Marcus, the third android, you get the introduction of a new type of scanning. Much like Connor, you can scan your surroundings, but rather than using clues for an investigation, you use the data around you to determine actions. For example, when trying to climb up a building, you're presented with multiple executions, but only one of them guarantees your safe execution. Using the data around the environment, you can determine which path to take. Marcus's perspective has him performing more physical actions with these scanning abilities. While Connor and Kara act as an investigator and caretaker, Marcus's story had him in the middle of a civil rights movement that at times worked well, and other times had me letting out a couple of oofs and yikes. Now, much like Quantic Dream's games before it, Detroit has you performing actions in context-sensitive form. This means that all you can really do is walk. You can perform actions when the game prompts you to according to the situation. The design of the UI in these instances is an improvement from previous games, giving you a quick button press, swipes on the PS4 touchpad, or gestures with the right stick. Occasionally you'll get motion prompts for the DualShock 4's gyroscope. These at times could get a bit gimmicky though. Ultimately, the 10 to 12 hour story offered a mostly well-paced experience that kept me engaged and invested for the most part, but certainly had instances where the serious moments just fell flat. There is a well-designed flowchart system that's shown to you at the end of a chapter in the game. This lets you follow the results of your decisions, see how your friends and even people online in the community compare to you in terms of your choices. Perhaps as a different personality of a character to see what an aggressive Connor may be different as compared to a more sympathetic Connor. Detroit Become Human is a true cinematic adventure. Quantic Dream has come a long way with their in-house engine, and the leap between Beyond Two Souls on PS3 to Detroit on PS4 is clearly visible. Character models look fantastic, with some of the biggest improvements being in the eyes and the way the light is casted and displayed on the characters' skins. The game often gives you the freedom with the camera to pan and turn wherever you want, with a quick camera button mapped to the R1 button. All of those options in the camera create some of the most cinematic moments in gaming I've ever played. However, the extra freedom with the camera could also at times lead to some clumsy moments of control too. On the regular PS4, the game is presented at a nice 1080p and a checkerboard 4K on the PS4 Pro. Both also target 30 frames per second, though you'll occasionally run into some minor dips under the 30 FPS line. It's a less common issue on the PS4 Pro than the original though. Regardless of the console you're on, both offer a stellar looking presentation. With Detroit Become Human tackling some of the more serious and heavy subjects, I noticed a large amount of music including the character themes to be almost dark and ominous-like. Kara's theme, for example, consisted mostly of uneasy long strings, as her story carries some of the more darker moments in the game. Connor's music, on the other hand, is a bit more fast-paced and heavier on the electronic bass. It really works well in the moments where you have to make quick and brash decisions. I enjoyed the selection of songs, though they were definitely overshadowed by the amazing performances done by the cast of characters. Brian Detroit, I think, stole the show for me with his performance as Connor, both in the times when I played Connor as a sympathetic android and an aggressive one. Brian's performance just blew me away. That's not to shoot down the rest of the cast either, well, maybe with the exception of Alice. I really enjoyed the performances that the main cast gave, with honorable mentions to Clancy Brown as Hank and Lance Henriksen as Carl. Detroit Become Human is one of the most cinematic and engaging stories I've ever played. It truly captures the feeling of being invested in a story and having a real impact on the narrative being told, well, to some extent. Some of the characters offered a bit more narrative freedom than others, and it was apparent when those pathways were being forced upon me. The story, though thrilling and entertaining most of the time, stumbles in some of the more serious moments that require the player's investment and remorse. While the execution and overall package of Detroit is a big improvement from previous Quantic Dream games like Beyond Two Souls, it doesn't completely stick the landing. Luckily, it only stumbles on delivering a good story rather than failing altogether. If you haven't played a Quantic Dream game before, this is certainly the one to pick up over the rest. That does it for my review of Detroit Become Human for the PS4 and PS4 Pro. If you have any questions about the game or games you'd like me to review in the future, please do let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, then drop it a like, consider sharing it with your friends. It helps more people find out about the channel, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you all very much for watching, hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you all in the next one.